Hello and welcome to what is actually still Section 1, but now the reworked Section 1 of support, the Royal Navy support for the Army in World War One and what they got up to. Now, this is going to sound a bit funny, but I'm going to give you a heads up. Plan for this day in terms of recording is to record this video and the next video and then bring my desk down here because I'm going to have help at that point, and so I can set up my desk in my workspace from my bedroom, in which case that should hopefully make things better. But that might mean the third video doesn't turn up till tomorrow, and the fifth videos probably won't turn up till tomorrow, because I'm going to do the two videos of Section 1, which need to be re-recorded, and the 3 videos of Section 2 this week. So, there are going to be 5 videos on this topic this week. I just don't know whether 3 will come out today or 2 on the day this comes out. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. Joys of teaching. So, today's topic is the Abercrombie class. Now, I love the Abercrombie class. They have a special place in my heart, mainly because they were also almost very nearly the Farragut class. Yes, named after that admiral. And there is a reason for this. They are pretty. Anyway, let's carry on. So, displacement 6,150 tons, length 334 feet 6 inches, beam 90 foot 2 inches, and draft 10 foot. So in metric or modern, that's 101.96 meters. So might as well, near enough of makes no difference, 102 meters in the length of a ship. Let's be honest, if 4 centimeters make a big difference in the length of your ship, then there is you're probably a sailing yacht. A very fast racing one, not a monitor. Beam is 27.48 meters again. Might as well be as close to 27.5, but the draft is bang on 3 meters apparently. Cute. Propulsion. 2 boilers supplying 2 vertical triple expansion reciprocating engines. Please notice, I am not saying 2 Admiralty boilers. I'm not saying 2 Yarrow type boilers. There is a reason for this. These ships were basically built with what was available, which is why they also got vertical and triple expansion reciprocating engines. And developed a top speed of 6.5 knots. Although one of them was once clocked apparently going at 7.2 knots. So, but theoretically it's 6.5 knots. Those are the speeds given for Raglan, which did actual speed trials. The rest didn't actually really go through that sort of process. Well, not entirely. Complement 198. Armament. 2 BL 14-inch gun Mark II 45 cals. If those don't sound like British measurements to you, well, there's a reason for that. We'll get into it in a second. 2 quick-firing 12-pounder, 18 CWT naval guns. 1 3-pounder, that's a 47mm anti-aircraft gun. 1 2-pounder Mark II anti-aircraft gun, pretty much a 30mm. Armour belt is 4 inches, 102mm. Deck between 2 and 1 inches, 51 to 25mm, depending on where you stood. And barbettes, 8 inch. Turrets, 10 inches. So it seems to me there are legitimate reasons for why turrets are heavily armoured. There are legitimate reasons they stick up most their targets and all these things. But there's also part of which sometimes look at the armouring given to the engines and the armour given to turrets on some ships and goes. It reminds me of the fact that in some air forces in World War II, the pilots would have accommodations which were sort of sheltered, have underground bunkers, all sorts of protection, all sorts of things for them to rest in. the ready maintenance crews and engineers, fitters and all that lot, wouldn't have anything. If they were lucky, a slit trench. So, yeah, it does always sort of remind me of that one. History. In a rather similar story to the Humber class, the company making the main arm for the Greek battleship Salamis, being constructed in Germany, had some spare turrets and guns thanks to a certain blockade. You know, it's the Royal Navy, that's, you know, just a minor blockade. Surely they'll let my guns pass. No, they won't let your guns pass. So Charles M. Schwab of the Bethlehem Steel Company decided to offer Winston Churchill the use of them. Now, when I say offered, basically it was a case of the Royal Navy said, if you try and send this, we will impound it. And nothing will get, you won't get anything for it. So he said, well, what about if I sell them to you? At which point the Admiralty went, what shall we do with them? Because we don't want 14-inch twin gun turrets. Honestly, we have enough dealing with the festoon of random stuff we've already picked up thanks to the beginning of this war. What are we going to do with 14-inch ones? Well, they kind of offered to sell them, and as you can see, this is when 14-inch twin guns in the Dreadnought era start to appear, and 14-inch guns start to appear in the Royal Navy sort of history. So we can blame Bethlehem Steel for King George V class. They would have had decent 15-inch guns if it hadn't been for this. It's all the Americans' fault. No, I mean the Martians. Seriously. Seriously. Anyway, getting back to the proper history. The army had been content with pre-dreadnought supporting them, but they weren't exactly shallow drafts, so they couldn't get that close and to give them fire support. And when the RN said 14-inch, well, to be honest, the British Army was sort of going, what? Interesting, the first couple of years of World War I are really the British Army going, how big? When it comes to artillery shells and artillery guns. Because you see, yes, siege artillery is a known thing in British Army's history, and all these things come up. But, and I say this with the nicest possible feeling involved, the British Army was used to fighting imperial wars by this point, where really your main thing had been maneuver and the warfare of maneuver. So having huge, great big guns, especially in the pre-tracked vehicle time, even in the post-tracked vehicle time, as the mouse will show you in World War II, German development of that particular vehicle. I'm never quite sure whether it was supposed to be a tank, a siege gun, or just something for everyone to fire at. But they're sort of going, wow, that's big. And so the monitor was literally designed around the guns. And you'll be able to see when you see the design. They are, well, all the weight's in the centre. You've got the engines balancing the gun, the forward guns. You've got, you know, the power supply aft, but aft of centre, and the guns forward of centre, and you've got the hull built around them. It's weight distribution 101 for trying to make a supercar. Apart from, honestly, a supercar, you would probably want a better power to weight ratio than they had. The two boilers supplying two vertical triple expansion engines gave them 2,310 indicated horsepower. So, when you've got supercars which have a performance speed, you know, created by, I don't know, 1 horsepower per kilogram on modern metric tonnage, this had pretty much, as makes no difference, 1 horsepower, 1 indicated horsepower. Indicated, remember, that's not shaft, that's indicated. per 3 kilograms. That's not the way you want it to be. Not if you want fast. Makes sense from monitor though. Doesn't matter from monitor. Originally, they were going to be named. Well, it basically gives them sort of, they've got the weight distribution of a supercar, but the performance of a Australian road train, as I put it. Originally planned to be named General Ulysses S. Grant, General Robert E. Lee, Admiral David Farragut, that was going to be the class leader, otherwise known as HMS Abercrombie or M1, and General Stonewall Jackson. Now, this was because the Americans were supplying the weaponry, and it was coming from Bethlehem. But despite the fact the Americans are giving Britain, and when I say giving, it's a very low cost procurement for the British, 8 14-inch guns in 4 twin turrets. They're still claiming they're neutral, and therefore the British naming ships after their leaders would have caused a small issue. Even leaders from the Civil War era. However, the fact that this didn't happen does save the Royal Navy from having a modern public relations issue to deal with. You know, we've got the whole things, you know, with Britain, the slave trade is one thing, and it's not a particularly nice part of history, but it's part of history. It's there. It happened. And I'm sorry, people often forget. The trade went in a free way. So, you would go down from Britain with goods, you'd sell them in Africa. You'd use the money from Africa to buy, usually from the local kings or networks there, slaves, for want of a better phrase. That was not a particularly nice transaction. Buying people is not good for anyone, not the people being involved, and frankly it doesn't do nice things to the people doing it either. It turns them into even bigger than they were. But leaving that to one side, then you go take them across to America. You sell your cargo, your slaves, people you carry on, the ones who survive, because you don't treat them. You treat them as well as you can because you don't want them to die, but you're honestly not the best in terms of treatment. And you buy more goods, and then you come across, and this is how you make your money. You bring those goods, cotton, coffee, sugar, whatever you bought from various plantations, there are lots of them, they sell lots of things, back to Britain, sell that, and then repeat, and that's how you make your money. This gives Britain this is one of the trade networks which Britain exploits to get its money in history. And because of having those trade networks, and maintaining those trade networks and protecting them, is one of the reasons why the Royal Navy gets a lot of funding. Now, then of course the Royal Navy later on gets used to stop the slave trade by basically going, we're going to park ourselves here, so this bit in the triangle is no longer going to work. So basically you're going to be trading stuff down here, taking goods back up to there, and taking goods across to there, and doing that one. But this part, we're going to stop now, because we've now, the British government and Britain have now changed their minds and decided this isn't what they want going on. Which is a good thing for the Royal Navy to do. But that's also, arguably, because the British government decided it was financially more in their favour to block it now by that point. We'll leave that to one side. So, the thing was, that's one point of history. And then there's the whole American Civil War, which Britain largely manages to keep out of. Naming these ships in World War I after, well, let's be honest, Grant is fine, and Farragut is cool. I would happily name a ship after him. Jackson and Lee, though. For starters, I think that's the, there's been, I think the British are being a bit too even-handed at that point. Honestly, the options would have been... Well, Pope was quite a good admiral, and whilst I would have liked Thomas to receive a ship named after him, you would probably have gone with Sherman. And there you go, you're fine. But unfortunately, this was that great romantic First Sea Lord Winston Churchill involved at this point. And that's why they probably had those names picked out, because, you know, he wasn't swept up with the martial image. Thankfully, didn't happen. Although, and again, I don't like naming ships for generals in the first place, and definitely not American ones. They have some good admirals in the American Civil War. Go with the with the Union admirals. You'd have been fine. Plus, the American Civil War is mostly about bombardments and fighting in rivers and running oppositions and landing, running through blockades and running ships and landing troops. So, you know, it makes sense. I'll leave that to one side. So, here is what I mean about these ships. And look at HMS Abercrombie. Look at that. Look at her carefully. You will see the weight is all in the center. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Just wish she had more power. Then she really would have been a speedboat. But didn't need it. You will notice that the stack is well behind the observation position and much lower than it. So the wind, when she's moving forward, even the slowly she's doing, should move the smoke back to keep her firing control clear. Yes, she has her guns forward. And yes, there is space at the back for the boats and everything is basically hanging off the stern. She does look good. Now, Abercrombie was built by Harland and Wolff Belfast. Actually, Abercrombie was Harland and Wolff built her and her sister. Which one? Havelock M2, which was originally apparently they were supposed to be Farragut and Grant. Those two. In the same dock as they built Olympic. They were, whilst they were basically fat, their beam, they were short enough that they could be both be constructed in the number 2 building berth. Which was nice. Although their guns couldn't be loaded there, they had to go up to the Clyde to have them fitted by Coventry Ordnance Works, Scotson place. Mainly because Harland Wolff just didn't have a big enough crane for the job. Abercrombie, when she was completed and commissioned in May 1915, sails for the Dardanelles. And she remains in the Mediterranean until 1919. Decommissioned in 1919. She spends her entire time supporting operations in Palestine, in various parts of the Aegean, and of course the Dardanelles for the war. That is what she's used for. So she doesn't support the Western Front. But trust me, there is a reason I'm going through this class. Then we have Havelock. Again, look at that beautiful design, that weight distribution. All they needed was more powerful engines. Just give me some turbines. Then battleship turbines and a couple of small tube boilers, or 2 or 4, or even better, 4 small tube boilers and 2 turbines powering the shafts. It could still go up a single stack. You could do that quite nicely. And oh my. Sorry. I now realise why Fisher possibly made it or decided to build HMS Furious, Courageous and Glorious. We'll leave that to one side. Havelock. Originally going to be HMS Grant. Uh, also sails for the Dardanelles, and she remains in the Eastern Mediterranean until January 1916. She then serves as guard ship at Lowestoft from then till the end of the war. Does various other duties as well from Lowestoft. Takes part in blowing up a few things when they're getting annoying. Sold in, well, disarmed in June 1921 and technically sold for breaking up in May 1921, but somehow managed to retain in reserve until resold on June 25th of June 1927 to the Ward shipyard at Preston. So she's kind of sold, then put into reserve, then sold again. She has an interesting career. And technically she's disarmed, but she's doing all sorts of weird things in that time. But there's nothing I can find. It's one of those scenarios where I know a ship is being crewed and is being moved because of some of the files I can see, but I can't tell you what she's up to or why she's being moved or what she's doing, or perhaps she's just being used as a store ship and those are like allocations. You just don't know. But she's a cute ship and she does well. So, I've kept talking about these 14-inch guns, and it seems unfair for me to talk about them and not mention the ship they're originally destined for. Yes, this is the Salamis. Now, this is an artist's impression of what it would look like if she'd been completed and served with the German Navy. This is what she was designed to look like, and over on the right is what she looked like by the end of the war. Left, far left. Well, this way. Right to the screen, yes, on the right. My left hand. Right as you look at it. I got it right the first time. So, now she's an interesting ship because, as we all know, and as I'll be getting into at some point this month, the Ottomans and the Greeks had a bit of a naval race going on, although the Greeks never really got into it, and the Ottomans, well, what they got into it didn't go that well. She was ordered in 1912 from A.G. Vulcan in Hamburg. She was laid down in 1913. She was launched on the 11th of November 1914. Talk about some bad luck going on there. And is eventually scrapped in 1932. She's the subject of a very long-running, well, you can almost say legal dispute. She was designed to carry 8 14-inch guns in 4 turrets. She was supposed to weigh roughly around 19,800 tons. And have a speed of 23 knots, which was higher than any other battleship of the period. She would have had 12 6-inch guns in casements as well, 12 75mm or 3-inch guns for AA and all sorts of random things they were talking about using those for, and 5 20-inch torpedo tubes. Her belt was going to be between 4 inches and 10 inches, or 98.4 to 250.8 millimeters. I do not understand what the 1.6 millimeters difference stops it being 100 millimeters and 4 inch and exactly 4 inches, or near enough makes no difference. 4 inches on the belt is saving, but apparently it is. Deck was going to be 2.875 inches or 73 millimeters. Barbettes 19.875 inches or 250.8 millimeters, and turrets 9.875 inches, 250.8 millimeters. Now, I think there you're getting the fun thing that the Greeks were trying to order in imperial, and the Germans, of course, work in metric. Hey, the fun times. She was supposed to design with 2 shaft turbines rated at 26,000 shaft horsepower for a top speed of 21 knots originally. But this grows, as said. As this is half the reason why she's delayed so long. She was originally going to have 6 14-inch guns, and then they rise up to 8. She was going to have 2 18-inch torpedoes, and that rises up to 5 20-inch torpedo launchers. It just keeps growing. She keeps growing and keeps getting more and more powerful. One of the things that also delayed her was the fact that there was the possibility that the South American dreadnought dreadnoughts could no longer be needed and could be put up to sale. There were 2 being for Brazil, which were already completed, and a 3rd under construction in Britain, and another 2 for Argentina being built in the United States. And the idea of getting hold of these 5 ships would have, by either the Ottomans or the Greeks, would have made a massive difference. So lots of things delayed Salamis, and then of course World War One happened, and well, the Germans decided not to complete her. They weren't going to pull the British, mainly because there were a lot of problems with the Germans completing her. She's designed for 14-inch guns. They either have to rework her to try and figure out how to fit 15-inch guns in her barbette, or they have to go down lower. That's a problem. If they do go down lower, she would have been faster, probably, because it would have reduced weight and allowed her to carry more ammunition, but still... I will cover her more when I do the dreadnought, the other dreadnought building powers. But Salamis is a sad, sad tale, and the story of her sister is even worse. But pretty much, that's what she looked like by the end of 1918. The thing about Salamis is that here's the simple. How do I put this without sounding massively patriotic and overly British? I can't, so I'm just going to do it. Okay? Germany didn't have the capacity. Okay? They didn't have the capacity to build her up. Whereas Britain could go, yes, more gun turrets. Yes, we've got space. We can build ships that can fit them. We can turn it into monsters. The Germans couldn't go, we have a hull with engines, with all the stuff bought for it sitting on the side here. The only thing that's missing to actually build it and complete it is turrets. They have enough pressing issues of their industry. They're trying to support their army. They're fighting a land war on 2 fronts, more than that if you start counting when the Italians get involved and are supporting the Austro-Hungarians. It's mind-boggling the commitments on Germany. They don't have the infrastructure in terms of naval terms that Britain does to be able to utilize it. And it's, as I said before, in 1889, Britain has passed the Defence Act, and that starts accelerating, especially then there's a rush of merchant building, which is encouraged by the British government, accelerating the creation of more and more shipping infrastructure. There are multiple yards where ships can go to be fitted out with weapons. There are multiple yards where ships can be built. There are massive berths, massive facilities to support them. The Germans do not have the same quantity of infrastructure. They just don't. They have been maxing out their production to build ships as fast as they could in peacetime, and Britain has been wrecking them. Honestly, when it orders 8 R-class battleships, as they are by World War II standards, by World War One standards, if they had all been in service prior to World War One, if they had been, if World War One had delayed, they would have, everyone would have laughed pretty much at the Grand Fleet, going, "Oh, you have these ships? We have all of these." Because honestly, the British would have kept on building. That's the other thing. You'd have had, if the R-class had managed to be in service before World War One began, you can imagine what the class would have come after them would have been. Hoods, the Admiral class, battlecruisers might well have been completed as well. And Britain could do that. Britain could afford to do it. Britain had the infrastructure it could do it, and it could afford to do it in a cost-effective manner. Why? Because it had to. There wasn't an option for Britain not to. Like for Germany, there wasn't an option not to invest in facilities and the support needed for their army. It sounds crass every time you go to this, but here's the point. And its fundamental thing, and this is especially prior to development of massive air power and to an extent when Britain was more reliant on its on its empire for producing its army in terms of numbers when it wanted to. Britain is an island and had to have a strong navy. It had a global maritime empire, dependent upon sea trade. It had no choice. It was either have naval power and naval forces and the stuff you needed, or don't have an empire. And it wasn't going to choose not to have an empire because that was what was seen was making Britain great and rich and powerful and safe. Germany has the same story. So, whereas the Royal Navy, Britain, can take those guns and turn them into monitors, the Germans cannot take the rest of the ship and add guns. Which is why that lovely artist's impression is an artist's impression. There's a second Greek battleship as well. So, theoretically, that could have been 2 more ships for the German line that they were building. Yeah. Already. But, again, where were the guns coming from? America. Was that because Germany couldn't supply good guns? Was that because the Greeks liked spending money on buying American guns to import them to Germany, bring them all the way across the Atlantic? All the problems of having and this is the pre-internet age of designs going backwards and forwards and hoping that that's going to be designed to fit into that. No, because honestly, where was the capacity? Right. Back to the Abercrombie class. And now it's HMS Raglan. Now, Raglan, she was a special little ship. She was. She was originally, and I say this with all good grace, was going to be Robert E. Lee. Now, Raglan has the fate of being sunk on the 20th of January 1918. She was commissioned May 1915. She is sunk in the Dardanelles. Well, not far from the Dardanelles, really. she's taking part in operations supporting the Third Battle of Gaza. Compared to Britain, not far from the Dardanelles, but actually I suppose it's Palestine and it's Eastern Mediterranean. It is Eastern Mediterranean, so I shouldn't really say Dardanelles. But she's sent out to the Dardanelles, and she basically spends most of her time either bombarding Dardanelles or wandering around various parts of the Ottoman Empire, blasting things up. And she is sunk during what is called the Battle of Imbros. Now, the Battle of Imbros is a very special time if you're the Turkish Navy, or the Ottoman Navy at the time, because HMS Lord Nelson and HMS Agamemnon, the Lord Nelson class pre-dreadnought battleships, which hang out around the monitors, are both busy in June, roughly 1918. No, January 1918. Sorry. One is currently very slow and out of position, and the other one, Lord Nelson, is off taking the squadron's admiral to a conference at Salonika. So you have the monitors, Raglan and M28, which we covered later, with two Akron-class destroyers, Tigress and Lizard, trying to support forces in the Murderos area. And unfortunately, Vice Admiral Herbert von Ruber-Paschwitz, the new German commander of the Ottoman Black Sea Fleet, decided that he needed to relieve Allied pressure on Palestine by making a sortie out from the Dardanelles and going down to attack the Aegean Squadron, where they were bombarding various parts of the British force, various parts of the Ottoman forces. Now, as I've already been over, the dreadnoughts are fast. Dreadnoughts are very fast. Pre-dreadnoughts, well, they're not turbine powered. They have triple expansion engines, but they're still okay. Not fast, but they can't catch a battlecruiser by any chance. But if they're in the right position, the battlecruiser doesn't really want to mess around with them too much. Especially if both of them are there. However, monitors have reduced versions of pre-dreadnought power plants in them, so they are incredibly slow for their size, as we've been over. And so we can guess what happens. The Gorbun, otherwise known as the Yavuz Sultan Salim, sails out with the... What's the cruiser become called as? It's the middle, but it used to be... the Breslau, which is now the middle. They basically sail out together. They sail down the coast. They get into a running fight with HMS Lizard because she's trying to keep them away from the monitors and does a fairly good job of going head on with them. But they can't fail to see the British trying to sort of hide the monitors in Kusu Bay. Basically, the monitors are trying to go, right, if we get into a bay where you can only attack us from one direction, we can maybe hold our position in here, and even though we're slow, if you have to come in, you have to come facing our guns and we can blast you. And we have got Raglan, she has got 14-inch guns. If she gets a lucky hit on you, you're going to be in trouble. But unfortunately, Selim's 11-inch guns, well, she can fire a lot more of them, and they manage to get the range quicker, because, again, it's a moving target, and it's got more guns, so you can fire a bigger salvo, and you can work out the range quicker. And basically, Raglan's taken out first, because she gets a hit in her magazine by an 11-inch shell. And then Mil 28 is also sunk. However, luckily for the British, on the way back, both Selim and Milne are hit mines. It's fluke, because otherwise it would have been a completely bad time for the British. And very embarrassing, but this way they get to claim that, well, you lost your cruiser and your battle cruiser is damaged. The British then consider trying to send E-12, a submarine, to go hunting her as she's damaged, but she's out of action because of maintenance issues. And when E-14 is sent to go and hunting her, she gets damaged, doesn't manage to find her, manages to torpedo a merchant ship, but on the way out gets caught on a sandbar and gets blown up. And a commander gets a Victoria Cross. So, Battle of Imbros. Classic example of why you do not leave your amphibious warfare ships unattended by a proper warship to look after them, just in case another proper warship turns up. Another argument for why you don't fit the San Antonio class with anything other than defensive missiles. Please don't fit them with offensive missiles. Please don't make them a high enough priority that everyone's going to try and kill them more than they are. And finally we have HMS Roberts, which was of course originally going to be HMS Jackson. Now, she has a fairly interesting career because she serves in Dardanelles and Eastern Mediterranean until February 1916. She then returns to Yarmouth, where she serves as a guard ship until the end of the war. And again, you might be going, why are the Royal Navy bringing these ships back as guard ships? And actually, in 1925, she's considered, well, we'll get onto that. Why do they bring them back as guard ships? Because, again, those big guns. They might not be able to go anywhere fast, but they're quite well armoured, and if you have them sitting in a port and someone tries to attack the port, I don't know, like launching raids on Scarborough, if you have 14-inch gun monitor sitting around, hello, you've arrived. Boom, boom, boom. Where the frick did that come from? There's no forts down here. Basically, they're extra protection. However, she's quite an interesting ship in other terms post-World War I. She's retained for trials. She does all sorts of things in her trials, initially decommissioned in May 1919, and initially sold for breaking up in May 1921. She's then retained by the Admiralty for trials, and even in 1925 she's considered for conversion to a mobile airship base with a moorship mast and refueling capabilities for them. But it's decided not to pursue it, and in the 1930s she was used for testing underwater protection for new warships, and finally sold in September 1936 to the Ward Shipyard at Preston for breaking up. So she misses out on World War II by 3 years. Because you have to think, if she'd still been around in 1939, the odds are the British would have gone, you know what, we could use another monitor. And it's not as if she's had a hard life. A good ship. They were a good class, they were a useful class. Something that's often forgotten about ships. We look for the flashy. Sometimes it's the practical. The high-low mix coming back again. In monitors this time. Right, and what have we got coming up in March? Well, on Thursday we have Crown Colony class cruisers. On the 5th of March I'm on World War II TV talking about Operation Claymore. On the 7th of March I have Bruce Ships 40, books used when writing. 11th of March, the Lend-Lease Act, 80 years to the day of it being signed. 14th of March, Bruce Ships 41, a history of armour and amphibious warfare, as suggested by Carl Harmon. Trying to work that one out, but I think it could be cool. 18th of March, Patron 19, second tier powers, dreadnought procurement and construction. Spain, Austria-Hungary, South America, Greece, Ottomans, suggested by Beonora. It should be fun. 21st of March, Bruce Ships 42, some more sci-fi. It's Bruce Ships 42, it's the answer to everything. Of course it's going to be sci-fi. 25th of March, Patron 20, Sino-Japanese War of 1894, Naval and Land Operations, Fighting Among More Feudal Societies by Jeff Beeler. I'm going to do that, give that my best shot. I actually know more about the naval operations than I do about the land ones, but I will try and put some land operation stuff in there. 26th of March, Armchair Admirals, Battle of Matapan. And the 2nd of April, Minotaur and Tiger class cruisers, and then the 4th of April, Bruce Ships 43. Long patrols we have coming up. We have, on the 2nd of March, Monitors of the Royal Navy, today, when this is going out. 9th of March, Crown Colony class cruisers. 16th of March, Lend-Lease Act in Long Patrol. 23rd of March, Minotaur class cruisers. 30th of March, Tiger class cruisers. And 6th of April, Monitors of the Royal Navy, Section 3. So, I hope you enjoyed part 2 of the Monitors discussion from Model 1. And, well, I'm going to keep going for all this. Thank you, take care. If you like the videos, please do like. If maybe consider subscribing, pressing the little bell down there. And possibly come join us on Discord, or if you want to feed my book habit, please consider Patreon. You get to vote and suggest. You get to both suggest topics and then vote on the ones which, as I said, I go through and I select the topics which I think I can do. So if you suggested a topic which I have no knowledge of and no ability to teach or do, then I would probably go no. Sorry, it won't make it through to the vote. But if I do have knowledge on it and I have the time, I think, in the coming month to do it, I need to do necessary research for it, because if it's big enough that I don't, then I might well go, this month's going to be busy, can you put it forward again next month? Then I'll put it into the vote. I usually put 6 to 7, sometimes 8 options forward, and then patrons get to vote on which 2 will get done. It seems fair in my mind. Anyway, thank you very much, take care, and have a nice day. Hope you've enjoyed this, and yeah, thank you.